They said the sky was no place for her. The captain stood on the tarmac, his voice carrying over the roaring engines and the restless hum of the airbase. "Any pilot," he declared, a smirk curling on his lips, "who thinks they can beat my boys, step forward." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. She did. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't even murmur encouragement. Instead, the air was filled with muffled laughter, the kind that coils in your stomach and makes you want to prove someone wrong. She walked forward with her helmet tucked under her arm, eyes locked on the captain, not once glancing at the rows of pilots who were already swapping bets on how quickly she would fail. Her name wasn't on the base roster. She wasn't a decorated academy graduate or the product of some elite fighter school. The patch on her flight suit wasn't even standard issue. It was faded, frayed at the edges, and bore a symbol most of them didn't recognize. To them, she was an outsider. To the captain, she was an inconvenience he could swat away in front of an audience. The challenge wasn't just about pride. It wasn't even about skill, not in his mind. This was a public test, a chance to cement the idea that the F-16's cockpit belonged only to a certain kind of pilot, his kind. And he had already decided she didn't belong. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But what he didn't know was that she had been here before. Not on this base, not in front of this particular crowd, but in this exact moment, facing a wall of doubt, standing on the edge of something they all swore she couldn't do. And every time before, she had walked away the last one standing. The airbase was alive that morning. A squadron was set to run a timed intercept and return exercise, a brutal mix of high-speed maneuvers, navigation through hostile airspace simulations, and an all-weather landing drill. The fastest pilot back would earn more than bragging rights. It would mean a place on the elite rapid response roster. The captain's team had run the course dozens of times. She'd never even flown it once. At least, that's what they believed. She met the captain's eyes. His smirk deepened as he gestured toward the flight line, where 6 F-16 Cess sat gleaming under the rising sun. The heat off the tarmac shimmered in waves, distorting the air like the surface of a mirage. She could feel every eye on her as she took the helmet from under her arm and locked it into place, the visor snapping down with a sound that cut through the murmurs. "Sure you're ready for this?" the captain called, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's not a sightseeing tour." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth was, she'd flown harder courses in worse conditions, conditions where failing didn't mean embarrassment. It meant death, but those stories weren't for this audience. They wouldn't believe them anyway. The hangar doors groaned open and ground crews moved in precision, guiding the jets into position. Her assigned F-16 sat at the far end, almost an afterthought. The paint was slightly dulled. The nose cone scuffed, the kind of aircraft you'd give to someone you didn't expect to bring it back in one piece. Perfect. She climbed the ladder, her boots ringing against the metal, and dropped into the seat. The cockpit smelled faintly of hydraulic fluid and the last pilot's cologne. She began her checks with the smooth familiarity of muscle memory. Switches clicked, displays lit, and the hum of power vibrated through the frame. Through the canopy, she could see the other pilots already strapped in, exchanging quick radio banter. They weren't talking to her. She was invisible, until she wasn't. The captain's voice crackled over the base intercom. "Remember people, this isn't just about speed, it's about precision. Anyone can go fast, few can come back in one piece." His eyes flicked toward her jet, the unspoken message hanging in the air. "Especially not you." She rolled her shoulders, loosening muscles that hadn't felt this alive in months. The roar of the first engine spooling up to full thrust sent a vibration through her chest. Soon, it would be her turn. Soon, the only thing between her and the open sky would be a short stretch of runway. And when she came back, because she would come back, no one here would ever forget the day the outsider took the captain's challenge and rewrote the rules. The tarmac trembled as the tower cleared them for takeoff. From the moment she had walked through the gates that morning, she could feel it, the subtle shift in atmosphere. the way conversations dropped to whispers when she passed, the sidelong glances measuring every inch of her. Airbases were tight-knit ecosystems, and outsiders didn't blend in easily. Especially not ones like her. Her name was Kala Rains, not captain, not major, not anything with the weight of an officer's commission, just Kala, and to most here, that was already a strike against her. She didn't wear her history on her sleeve the way they did, no rows of polished ribbons on her chest, no glittering insignia on her cap, just a single weathered patch on her right shoulder, a silver hawk diving through a black storm cloud that most of them didn't recognize. Her flight record wasn't in the base database, that was deliberate. The missions she had flown were sealed under layers of clearance the captain's crew didn't have. If they pulled her name up in the system, they'd find a single line, civilian contractor, cleared for restricted airspace operations. That was all, and that was enough for the Whisper network to decide she didn't belong. She'd seen their type before, men who'd grown up in the rigid corridors of military academies, who believed the only pilots worth their wings came from their world. They weren't necessarily bad pilots, in fact, they were usually exceptional, but they were also predictable. She'd built her life on exploiting predictable, while the others were handpicked for precision and control. Kala's background was a jagged path. She'd started in bush plains, threading between mountains and low-visibility snow squalls where landing strips were nothing more than frozen rivers. She'd ferried supplies into war zones in patched-up transports that rattled so hard on takeoff, she had to keep her teeth clenched to avoid biting her tongue. She'd flown in storms that made even seasoned pilots refuse to leave the ground. And when the world needed her most, she'd disappeared into the quiet folds of classified work, missions with no call signs, no radio chatter, no witnesses but the clouds and the gunmetal horizon. The captain didn't know any of that. To him, she was just a civilian in a borrowed uniform trying to prove a point she had no business proving. He'd seen dozens like her over the years, eager, underqualified, and crushed under the weight of their first real test. The pilots he commanded were already talking like the race was over before it began. In the ready room earlier, she'd overheard them. Guess the captain wants an easy win today. Won't even need afterburners. Bet she doesn't even get off the runway without stalling. She had smiled to herself, not because their words didn't bother her, but because they reminded her of a lesson she'd learned a long time ago. The louder someone underestimates you, the quieter they'll be when you win. Out on the tarmac, the lineup of F-16s gleamed like a row of silver arrows, each nose pointed toward the runway. The ground crews were efficient, running pre-flight checks and topping off fuel, but there was no mistaking the subtle difference in treatment. The others were surrounded by mechanics double-checking every gauge, adjusting every strap. Her jet got a cursory glance, a single wrench twist, and a good enough, perfect. She didn't want their help. Sliding into the cockpit earlier had felt like stepping into another version of herself. On the ground, Kala was the outsider, the question mark. In the air she was inevitable. Her hands had mapped this layout 1,000 times over, even if this particular bird had never been hers before. The throttle, the stick, the HUD, it was all muscle memory. Through the canopy, she could see the captain walking down the line, stopping at each jet to exchange a few words with his pilots. When he reached hers, he leaned close enough that she could see the fine cracks in his aviator lenses. "Stay out of their way," he said, evenly. "No shame in knowing your limits." She tilted her head just enough for him to see her eyes behind the visor. "No shame in breaking them either." He gave a short, humorless laugh and walked away. She watched him climb the tower stairs, knowing his vantage point would give him a perfect view of what was about to happen. The base thought this would be a story about an overconfident civilian learning her place. She intended to make it a story they'd still be talking about years from now. Somewhere in the distance, the tower cleared the first pilot for takeoff. Engines roared, tires screamed against the runway, and an F-16 tore into the air like a launched spear. One by one, the others would follow. She was last in line, which suited her just fine, because she'd learned something in her years flying dangerous skies, the last one to leave the ground, often knows exactly how to be the first one back. On most days, the airbase drills were routine. Today was different. Today wasn't about logging flight hours or practicing standard maneuvers. This was the Raven Run, a trial designed to separate the competent from the elite. The course was simple on paper: take off from the base, navigate through a simulated hostile airspace corridor, perform a precision strike on a target range 50 miles out, then return and land under worsening weather conditions. Every move was timed, every maneuver was scored. And in the end, the first pilot to land without penalty would claim the top slot on the rapid response roster. To the captain, the outcome was already decided. His squadron had run the Raven Run so many times they could almost fly it blindfolded. They knew the simulated SAM sights, the sharp dogleg turn over the desert ridge, the wind shear that always hit at 12,000 feet. It was their home turf. Kala, she'd never flown it, at least, that's what they thought. In truth, she'd spent the last 2 nights studying the Raven Run in obsessive detail: maps, satellite imagery, even grainy footage from helmet cams she'd found in archived after-action reports. She knew where the desert floor shimmered with mirages that could fool your depth perception, and she knew the exact angle to cut the ridge without bleeding speed. She'd even studied wind patterns from the past decade, because she understood something the captain didn't: every obstacle had a rhythm, and if you learned that rhythm, you could turn it into an advantage. But the stakes weren't just about proving herself. Winning the Raven Run meant something far more personal. 2 months ago, she'd been contracted to deliver humanitarian supplies to a conflict zone. The mission had been scrapped at the last minute when the military declared the area too dangerous for civilian aircraft. But 2 days later, she'd seen the news: an elite squadron, this squadron, had flown that same route to deliver munitions instead. That had been the moment she decided she wanted in. Not because she wanted to drop bombs, but because she wanted to be in the kind of position where she could decide when to save lives instead of destroy them. The rapid response roster wasn't just for combat missions, it was the tip of the spear in every crisis: natural disasters, evacuations, aid drops. Whoever topped that list had the power to act before anyone else, and right now, the captain controlled it like a personal kingdom. Beating him on his own course wouldn't just humiliate him, it would open a door he'd spent years keeping shut. The air buzzed with tension as the second jet roared down the runway. The pilots launched in staggered intervals, each disappearing into the heat haze before their afterburners faded from sight. Ground crews tracked their positions on monitors inside the control tower, radios crackling with clipped chatter. From her place at the end of the line, Kala listened to the call signs leapfrog ahead of her. Falcon 1, airborne; Falcon 2, airborne. Each name was followed by the sound of the captain's voice, steady, confident, congratulating his pilots before the real race even began. She rested her gloved hand on the throttle, feeling the faint vibration of the engine beneath her. Her heart wasn't pounding with nerves, it was keeping perfect time with the rhythm she'd memorized from the maps and wind charts. She knew exactly where she'd gain seconds, and exactly where they'd lose them. In the tower, the captain leaned over the radar screen, already calculating finish times in his head. He'd seen too many hotshot civilians flame out when faced with a real challenge. And in his mind, Kala was just another one waiting to fail. But he hadn't seen her on a jungle airstrip, in the middle of monsoon season, wrestling a crippled aircraft into the sky with nothing but gut instinct and a prayer. He hadn't seen her dive between canyon walls with 50 feet of clearance on either side because the only other way out was straight into enemy fire. And he hadn't seen the way her eyes narrowed now, the way her entire body seemed to coil for launch like a predator about to strike. The radio crackled again: Falcon 6, cleared for takeoff. Her turn. The stakes had never been higher, not for the captain, not for the squadron, and not for her. In less than 20 minutes, one of two things would happen. She'd either be walking away from the F-16 in humiliation, or she'd be stepping out of it as the first pilot to land, shattering every expectation they'd had. She tightened her grip on the stick. The tower gave the go-ahead. The runway stretched out before her, like an open dare. The moment she stepped fully into the cockpit, the noise of the airbase seemed to fade. The shouts of ground crew, the distant roar of other jets punching through the clouds, even the tower chatter, all of it dimmed into the background hum of her breathing inside the helmet. This was her world now. The F-16's cockpit was a compact universe of precision. The glass canopy arched above her like the dome of a planetarium, and every switch, gauge and display seemed to glow with quiet readiness. Her gloved fingers moved across the controls in a sequence so familiar, it felt like reciting a prayer. Throttle, check, stick responsive. Flight control surfaces, clear. HUD alignment, perfect. Oxygen flow, steady. She adjusted the seat harness, pulling the straps tight, until the fabric bit against her shoulders. The restraint wasn't just safety, it was a reminder that in this machine, she was part of the airframe. The jet didn't just carry her, it became her. Through the canopy glass, she could see the captain watching from the control tower balcony. He stood with his arms folded, chin lifted just enough to convey that this was entertainment for him. She wondered if he'd keep that same expression when her wheels touched down first. Her earpiece crackled. Falcon 6, status, systems green, she replied, her voice even. The ground crew signaled from the left wing, their wands sweeping in a slow, practiced rhythm. One mechanic gave her a brief nod, neutral, unrateable, before stepping back. She rested her hand on the throttle, feeling the vibration of the idle engine like the faint thrum of a heart about to race. She had been in cockpits since she was 19. Back then it had been old prop planes and clattering cargo haulers, nothing like the polished precision of this fighter. But the fundamentals never changed. You respected the machine, you respected the sky, and you understood that both could turn on you in an instant. The HUD shimmered with green data, altitude 0, airspeed 0, weapons systems inactive. She wasn't here to fight, but the F-16 was a predator by nature, and even now, it seemed to hum with a restrained hunger to be unleashed. Her mind flicked through the course she'd memorized. The first leg was a straight climb into a crosswind that could shove an inattentive pilot a mile off track. The second was a dog-leg turn over the canyon ridge, tight enough that inexperienced flyers bled too much speed in the pull. After that, it was all about precision, threading through simulated SAM coverage without triggering alerts, hitting the target range with pinpoint accuracy, then racing the clock back to base. Falcon 6, taxi into position. The words were almost unnecessary. Her hands moved before her conscious mind did, guiding the aircraft forward in a smooth roll. The nose wheel tracked perfectly along the painted center line, the rumble of the tarmac beneath her becoming a steady percussion. She eased the throttle, feeling the jet respond instantly, like a coiled animal sensing it was about to be set free. She remembered another runway, years ago, half the length and twice as dangerous. A jungle airstrip pocked with potholes, rain coming down so hard she could barely see the tree line. She'd taken off in a patched-up transport that day, the left engine coughing smoke before they were even airborne. If she'd waited for perfect conditions, she'd still be on the ground. That was the day she'd learned the most important truth of flying: hesitation kills. Now, there was no hesitation in her. She lined up on the runway threshold, the horizon stretching ahead in a sharp, clear line. The sky above shimmered with heat, a pale blue canvas waiting to be cut open by the scream of jet engines. The tower cleared her. Falcon 6, you are go for takeoff. Her fingers tightened on the stick, her thumb brushed the throttle forward. The low rumble beneath her deepened into a growl, then a roar, then the pure, unrestrained scream of power as the afterburner lit. She was no longer Kala Rains, the outsider on the ground. In this moment, she was something else entirely, steel and fire and precision, a creature born to tear through the air. And the captain, watching from above, had no idea that his challenge was about to turn into his humiliation. The moment she slammed the throttle fully forward, the world behind her ceased to exist. The afterburner ignited with a thunderous roar, pressing her back into the seat as the F-16 lunged down the runway like a predator loosed from its chain. The tarmac blurred beneath her, white center line flashing past in rapid intervals. The canopy vibrated with the deep growl of the engine, and her HUD numbers climbed in sharp green increments, 80 knots, 100, 130. The crosswind hit exactly where she'd predicted, a sudden shove from the left that could send a careless pilot drifting dangerously close to the runway edge. She countered instantly, nudging the stick just enough to hold her line without bleeding speed. The nose lifted, the main gear broke contact, and the F-16 leapt into the sky with a force that felt almost alive. Her visor filled with blue and sunlight. The desert floor dropped away beneath her in a rush of ochre and gold. In the corner of her HUD, she caught a glimpse of the trailing exhaust plumes from the last jet to launch, Falcon 5, already a dark speck climbing toward the ridge. The race was on. Falcon 6 airborne, she reported, her voice steady despite the G-forces pressing into her chest. The captain's voice came back over the comms, clipped and smug. Copy Falcon 6, try not to get lost up there. She ignored him. The first leg was all about acceleration. She kept the afterburner engaged longer than most pilots dared, climbing at a steep angle that forced her body deeper into the seat. The altimeter spun upward, 3,000 feet, 5,000, 8,000 until the air smoothed, and the turbulence eased into a clean slicing trajectory. Below the desert was a patchwork of dry riverbeds and jagged rock spines. The sun glared off the canyons, casting long shadows that cut across the terrain like scars. She spotted the canyon ridge ahead, a dark jagged line etched against the horizon. That was the first real test. Most pilots took the ridge at a wide arc, trading speed for safety. She had no intention of doing that. Her mind replayed the footage she'd studied, dozens of runs where pilots lost precious seconds to overcorrection. The secret wasn't brute force, it was timing. She leveled out just before the ridge, airspeed holding steady at 650 knots, then dipped the nose slightly to build an extra burst of momentum. At the precise moment the canyon walls began to close in, she pulled back hard, the G's punching into her chest, and banked into the turn so tightly, the horizon spun into a blur. The F-16's wings flexed under the stress, but the jet held, carving the canyon lip so close that her wingtips felt like they were slicing through the shadow itself. When she leveled out on the far side, she was already closing the distance on Falcon 5. Her comms crackled with background chatter, pilots calling out their positions, confirming their checkpoints. She kept silent, conserving her breath, eyes locked on the faint glint of the other jet ahead. The next phase was the simulated same gauntlet, a web of radar threat zones tracked by the turbo. Trigger 1, and you took a time penalty. The trick was threading through without bleeding speed, something most pilots balanced cautiously. She didn't balance, she cut. Dipping low, she skimmed the desert floor at treetop height, weaving through the imaginary danger zones with micro-adjustments that looked reckless, but were precisely calculated. Her HUD flashed warnings as she brushed the very edge of the no-go cones, but never crossed them. The radars in the tower would be watching her trace on the screen, wondering if it was skill or luck keeping her in the clear. It wasn't luck. By the time she hit the top range Falcon 5 was directly in her sights. She rolled hard into position, locking her simulated munitions on the coordinates. The HUD confirmed with a green flash, target acquired. When she squeezed the trigger, felt the brief vibration of the weapon system registering a clean strike, and pulled away without losing speed. The return leg loomed ahead, and with it, the river that could make or break the run.
The horizon was already darkening with a low smear of storm clouds. She'd studied those clouds. She knew they would mean strong crosswinds on descent. Crosswinds that could make the fastest pilots overshoot the runway or come in too shallow. Her plan wasn't just to survive them, it was to use them. And as she throttled forward, the F-16 roaring toward the gathering storm, she knew she was no longer the last one in this race. She was hunting.
The clouds ahead swelled like a wall, their underbellies dark with the promise of turbulence. From the tower's perspective, the Raven run was a timed exercise. Up here, it was turning into a hunt. Falcon 5 must have spotted her on his radar, because his voice suddenly cut across the comms. Falcon 6, didn't expect to see you this far up. She didn't answer. Talking was for pilots who had time to waste, and right now, every second mattered. The gap between them was shrinking fast. Through the haze, she could see his afterburner flare as he tried to pull away. He was good, smooth on the stick, confident in his maneuvers, but he was predictable. He climbed to gain a speed advantage in the thinner air, just as she'd seen in the archive footage of past runs. She'd been waiting for that. Without hesitation, she dropped lower, letting gravity gift her extra speed. The G-forces slammed into her chest as she dove, the altimeter spinning down. At this altitude, the ground blurred by in streaks of gold and shadow, and the air was rougher, buffeting her jet with invisible fists. But she was gaining. The radio crackled again, this time the captain's voice. Falcon 5, don't let her sit on your 6, push it. He didn't realize he'd just told her exactly what she wanted to hear. Falcon 5 banked hard right, angling toward the storm's edge. She rolled with him, matching his turn so tightly her wingtips sliced the same air. The canopy was alive with streaks of lightning ahead, the storm building into a chaotic dance of light and shadow. This was where most pilots would back off, unwilling to risk the unpredictable winds. She pressed forward. He tried a defensive roll, snapping his jet into a tight barrel to shake her. She mirrored the move perfectly, keeping her nose locked on his tail. In her HUD, his outline was steady, a phantom target she refused to let slip away. Falcon 6, watch your distance, the tower warned. She eased off just enough to stay within safety margins, but not enough to give him breathing room. The truth was, she didn't need to pass him in the air. If she could keep pressure on him, force him to fly his approach faster than he was comfortable with, he'd make mistakes. Mistakes she could use to beat him to the ground. The first hint of turbulence from the storm hit like a shove to the side. Her jet shuddered, but her hand stayed steady on the stick. Falcon 5 wasn't as smooth. She saw his wing wobble in the gust. It was a small thing, a barely perceptible dip, but it told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't as comfortable in dirty air. Perfect. She adjusted her line, slipping just far enough to the left to let the storm winds buffet her into a faster descent angle. It was counterintuitive. Most pilots fought the wind, bleeding speed to hold a textbook path. She used it, letting the gusts sling her forward in short bursts of acceleration. Through the comms, she heard him breathing harder now. His maneuvers were becoming sharper, less fluid. The storm was getting to him. She leaned into the turn, the F-16's frame creaking under the pressure, and punched the throttle to close the last of the gap. For a brief moment, their canopies were almost level, two jets knifing through the churning sky in parallel arcs. Lightning flashed, illuminating his helmet as he turned his head just enough to see her there. Even through the visor, she could sense it, the flicker of disbelief. She didn't give him time to process it. With a precise roll, she shifted above his flight path, catching a tailwind that boosted her forward just as the storm began to spit heavy rain. Droplets streaked across the canopy like tracer rounds, the roar of the engine mixing with the hammering of water, and then she was ahead. The base was still miles away, hidden beyond the storm front, but for the first time since takeoff, she was leading someone who wasn't used to being led. And she could almost feel the captain's eyes narrowing in the tower, watching the blip on his radar screen that shouldn't have been in front, yet was. The sky wasn't just a race course anymore. It was a battlefield, and she'd just claimed the high ground. For a few glorious minutes, she held the lead. The storm wrapped around her like a living thing, its gusts alternating between pushing her forward and trying to tear the jet from under her. Every instrument in the cockpit was alive with shifting numbers, altitude, airspeed, wind vectors, and her eyes danced between them in a constant rhythm. Then the warning light blinked. It was subtle at first, just a flicker on the right console. She almost ignored it, thinking it was static from the turbulence. But then it pulsed again, steady, this time, accompanied by the faint chime of a systems alert. Heck, press low. Her jaw tightened. Low hydraulic pressure meant reduced responsiveness on the control surfaces. In normal conditions, it was manageable. In a storm, while threading a high-speed approach, it was a recipe for disaster. She flicked through the diagnostic screen, scanning for the source. No leak indicators, no full system failure, just a pressure drop in one of the auxiliary pumps. It was the kind of fault that could be a false reading, or the kind that could turn a smooth landing into a skid across the tarmac. She eased the stick, testing the feel. The jet responded, but there was a whisper of lag, a fraction of a second. In a race measured in seconds, that delay could cost her everything. Behind her, Falcon 5 was closing the gap. The storm masked their exact distance on radar, but she didn't need the numbers. She could feel his presence, the way a hunted animal senses its predator drawing near. Falcon 6, we're reading an alert on your secondary hydraulics, the tower said in her ear. Recommend you abort and return at reduced speed. She almost laughed. Reduced speed meant handing the race to the captain's squadron on a silver platter. Negative, tower, she replied. Continuing approach. There was a pause, a crackle of static, then the captain's voice. That's a safety advisory, Rains. Don't be stupid. She didn't answer. She couldn't afford the distraction. The storm thickened ahead, swallowing the horizon. The rain was heavier now, hammering the canopy so hard it blurred her vision. Lightning forked across the sky in jagged bursts, and the wind hit in violent, unpredictable surges. She adjusted her course to compensate, leaning on instinct more than instruments. Years of flying in rough conditions had given her a second sense for turbulence. She could almost feel the next gust before it hit. But the hydraulic lag was real. In tight maneuvers, it forced her to anticipate just a little earlier, to trust her timing completely. One miscalculation, and she'd either overshoot or stall. Falcon 5's voice came over the comms again, smug despite the weather. Little bumpy for you up there, 6? She kept her breathing slow, even. Try to keep up, 5. Through a break in the clouds, she caught a glimpse of the base far ahead, its runways gleaming wet under the storm, lights flickering through sheets of rain. She was close, too close to back off now, but the approach would be brutal. The crosswinds over the base were infamous, a swirling mix of downdrafts from the surrounding hills and thermal pockets off the wet tarmac. Pilots had been known to bounce landings here on clear days. In this weather, the risk multiplied tenfold. The captain's voice cut back in, sharper this time. Rains, this is an order. Pull back. She smiled grimly under her visor. Orders had never stopped her before. The next gust slammed into her right side, harder than any before, and the hydraulic lag made the correction sluggish. The first F-16 rolled farther than she wanted, her left wingtip dipping dangerously close to the cloud bank below. For a heartbeat, she thought she might lose it. Then she pulled, timing the correction a half-second early, forcing the jet back into level flight. The strain thrummed through the frame, and the alert light blinked again like a warning growl. She exhaled slowly. She could make the landing, but it would take every ounce of precision she had left, and she'd have to do it while keeping Falcon 5 from overtaking her in the final mile. The setback had come, as it always did. Now it was a question of whether she could turn it into an advantage, and in her experience, the answer to that question was always the same: yes. The blinking hydraulic warning light wasn't just a system fault, it was a trigger. Somewhere in the back of her mind, it pulled open a door she usually kept locked, and suddenly she was back there, years earlier, in a cockpit filled with smoke. It had been a night run over the Gulf, a storm as black as ink, swallowing the horizon. She'd been ferrying a medical team into a coastal city, cut off by flooding, flying a patched-up twin-engine turboprop, with a history of mechanical stubbornness. They'd known the risk when they took the job: old aircraft, no escort, and a storm path that made most pilots shake their heads and walk away. Halfway in, lightning struck the right wing, not a glancing kiss, but a full white-hot punch that ripped through the frame like a spear of molten glass. The lights flickered, the instruments wavered, and then came the real problem. The starboard hydraulic system dumped its pressure. The lag had been immediate. Controls went from smooth to syrup thick, every maneuver requiring twice the input and 3 times the anticipation. At the same time, the starboard engine coughed and began bleeding RPMs. She'd been flying with an old instructor that night, a man named Halverson, who'd taught her that the worst thing you could do in a crisis was let your hands get ahead of your brain. The sky doesn't care about your panic, he'd told her once. It only answers to skill. She'd kept those words in her head as she fought the crippled aircraft, each movement deliberate, calculated. The wind slammed into them in chaotic bursts, and with the hydraulics half dead, every correction had to be made early, and held just long enough to bite through the drag. The medics in the back didn't know how close they were to going down. All they knew was that she was quiet, too quiet, and that her knuckles were white on the controls. When they'd finally broken through the wall of rain, the flooded city appeared below like an island in the dark. The airstrip was barely visible, the runway lights dim and flickering, water pooling along the edges. She'd brought the aircraft in low, fighting the gusts with a stubborn precision she didn't know she had until that night. They landed hard, too hard, by training standards. But the wheels held, the brakes screamed, and they stopped 50 feet before the end of the strip. The medics had sprinted off into the chaos to do their work, and she'd sat there for a moment, staring at the rain-streaked windshield, listening to the tick of cooling metal. She'd never told anyone about the lightning strike, or the hydraulic loss, or how close they'd come to being nothing more than a line in an accident report. Not because she was hiding it, but because no one would have believed her unless they'd been in that cockpit. Now hurtling through the present-day storm in the F-16, she recognized the same rhythm, the same demands. The lag in the controls was almost comforting, not because it was safe, but because she knew how to dance with it. Falcon 5 was still behind her, but closer now. She could sense his push, his determination to catch her before the runway. What he didn't understand was that this storm was her element. The chaos that unsettled him was the air she had been breathing her entire flying life. She rolled the jet slightly, testing the lag again. It was consistent, predictable, even. That meant she could plan for it. She could weaponize it. As she broke through the final layer of cloud, the base came into full view below, runway lights glowing faintly through the sheets of rain, the tarmac slick and glistening like black ice. The wind currents here were exactly as she'd charted a crosswind from the northwest, building into a vicious shear at lower altitude. Most pilots fought it until the last second, letting the wind shove them off alignment, and then muscling the jet back in place for touchdown. She wouldn't wait. She'd fly the entire approach crooked, nose into the wind, bleeding off just enough drift, so that when the wheels touched, she'd be perfectly aligned. The captain's voice came over the comms again, this time quieter. "Falcon 6, you've got weather markers off the scale. Call it off." She smiled faintly. He didn't sound smug anymore. The hydraulic warning light blinked once more, as if to remind her it was still there. She glanced at it briefly, then back to the runway. She'd flown through fire before. This was just rain. The storm over the base was no longer a backdrop, it was an opponent. The wind howled across the canopy, shoving at the F-16 with invisible hands. Every gust tried to tilt her off course. Every burst of turbulence dared her to overcorrect. And always, in the corner of her vision, that hydraulic warning light pulsed like a heartbeat. She kept her breathing measured, her mind narrowing to the strip of runway glowing through the rain ahead. Falcon 5 was close enough now that she could hear his engine growl in her headset whenever he pushed the throttle. He was playing the classic approach strategy, wait for the leader to make a mistake, then slip past in the final stretch. It would have worked against anyone else. She pitched her nose into the crosswind, adopting a crabbed approach that made the jet look almost sideways relative to the runway. Most pilots hated this technique because it felt wrong, unnatural. She loved it. The way she saw it, you didn't fight the wind, you gave it exactly what it wanted, and then took it back at the last possible second. The hydraulic lag meant she couldn't afford to wait until the flare to straighten out. She began her corrections early, feeling the jet resist her commands for that fraction of a second before obeying. It was like flying with a stubborn partner. You had to lead the dance, not follow it. Falcon 6, your alignment's off, the tower called, their tone edging toward panic. She ignored them. Falcon 5 tried to match her crab angle, but she saw the wobble immediately. He wasn't used to committing so early. The storm gust shoved him, and he corrected too late. By the time he settled, she'd gained another 50 meters on him. The rain intensified, hammering so hard against the canopy that the runway blurred into a smear of light. She didn't need to see it perfectly. Her hands and eyes worked in tandem, reading the instruments, the horizon, the way the aircraft felt under her. 50 feet above the tarmac, the crosswind tried its last shove, a violent blast that pushed hard from the right. The hydraulic lag should have been a liability here. Instead, she'd already calculated for it, pulling early, so the jet rolled level exactly when the gear touched down. The landing was hard, the tires hissing against the wet surface, but the alignment was perfect. She dropped the nose wheel and deployed the air brakes in one smooth motion, letting the F-16's own drag slow her before she eased into the wheel brakes. Falcon 5 hit the runway seconds later, but the gust caught him just enough to skew his touchdown. He had to correct before deploying his brakes, and that delay was fatal. Through the sheets of rain, she saw the edge of the runway rushing toward her. She wasn't slowing fast enough. Her pulse spiked, but she didn't panic. Instead, she feathered the brakes, then gave a brief burst of thrust in the opposite direction to settle the jet's momentum before braking hard again. It worked. The F-16 rolled to a stop with a good 30 feet of runway left. Her breath came out slow, steady, like she'd just finished a casual drill. In the tower there was silence for a beat too long. Then the captain's voice, low and sharp, broke through. Falcon 6, confirm, you landed first. She keyed her mic. That's affirmative, Captain. Any pilot, right? The pause on the other end was almost sweet. She taxied off the runway, the storm still raging overhead, and saw Falcon 5 pulling in behind her. Even through the blur of rain, she caught the look he gave her, part disbelief, part respect. She hadn't just beaten the squadron's best on their own course. She'd done it with a mechanical handicap, in the worst weather they'd seen in months. And somewhere up in the tower, the captain was realizing that the story of the Raven Run had just been rewritten, with her name at the top. When she rolled the F-16 to a stop on the taxiway, the storm seemed to soften, not in force, but in presence. The rain still pounded the canopy, the wind still hissed across the tarmac, but inside the cockpit, there was a sudden surreal quiet. She powered down the afterburner, the scream of the engine fading to a low, steady hum. The hydraulic warning light was still blinking, but it no longer felt like a threat. It was just a reminder, a red glowing trophy of the fight she'd just won. As she popped the canopy, the roar of the outside world rushed back in. Rain lashed against her helmet, running in rivulets down her visor. The ground crew jogged toward her, but their expressions weren't the usual brisk professional masks. They were staring. No cheers, no banter, just silence. She unclipped her harness, swung her legs over the side, and dropped onto the slick tarmac. Her boots splashed into a shallow puddle, sending a thin arc of water outwards. The crew chief, a grizzled man with oil permanently etched into the lines of his hands, stepped forward. He opened his mouth, like he was going to say something, then just shook his head slowly, and gave a short, almost reluctant nod. Across the taxiway, Falcon 5's jet came to a stop. He climbed out, moving stiffly, helmet still on. She expected some sort of glare, some post-race excuse about the weather or the crosswind, but when their eyes met through the rain, he simply gave her a brief salute. Not friendly, not grudging, just respect. The captain emerged from the base entrance moments later, his flight jacket pulled tight against the rain. He walked toward her with measured steps, the way a man approaches a situation he hasn't yet decided how to handle. His sunglasses were gone, the storm making them useless, so she could see his eyes, sharp, assessing, calculating. Falcon 6, he said evenly, stopping a few feet away. She kept her helmet on,
Visor down, Captain. You understand you disregarded 2 direct advisories from the tower. I do. You understand you risked equipment and personnel safety. I do. He studied her for a long moment, the rain dripping from his hair and down the hard lines of his jaw. And you landed first. Also true. Another pause, then almost imperceptibly, the corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but not its opposite either. You'll report to my office in the morning. She nodded. I'll bring coffee. He turned and walked back toward the base without another word. Around them, the squadron was slowly regathering, the other jets taxiing in and shutting down. Pilots climbed out, some staring openly, others deliberately avoiding her gaze. The silence wasn't just shock, it was recalibration. They were rewriting where she fit into their mental hierarchy, and it was taking time. She pulled off her helmet, letting the rain hit her bare face. The air was cool and electric with the scent of ozone, every breath tasting faintly of the storm she'd just cut through. Somewhere inside, under the adrenaline and the quiet satisfaction, she felt the first hint of what this win would mean. Tomorrow, there would be questions, maybe even resistance, but the simple truth was undeniable. The captain had said any pilot, and when the race ended, she'd been the one already on the ground. For now, that was enough.
The storm was gone by morning, leaving the airbase scrubbed clean and bright under a pale sun. The runways steamed gently in the rising heat, and the smell of jet fuel drifted on the light breeze. Inside the main operations building, however, the atmosphere was anything but light. Kala walked the narrow hallway toward the captain's office, her boots thudding softly on the polished floor. Pilots and techs passed her without speaking, their eyes flicking toward her with that same unreadable mix she'd seen the night before, part curiosity, part recalculation. When she reached the office door, she knocked once. Enter. The captain sat behind a broad desk, his jacket hung neatly on a wall hook, sleeves rolled up to the elbows. His desk was immaculate, no loose papers, no clutter, just a neat stack of mission logs, a steaming mug of coffee, and a radar printout she recognized immediately. The trace of yesterday's Raven run. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. She did, keeping her posture relaxed but alert. For a moment he didn't speak. He simply looked at her, eyes steady, weighing something invisible. Then he tapped the radar sheet with a single finger. You know what this shows, that I landed first, that you pushed a bird with a hydraulic fault through a Category 2 storm, and didn't die in the process. His voice was flat, but there was an undercurrent there, whether it was irritation or admiration, she couldn't tell. You said any pilot, she replied, his gaze sharpened, and you heard my advisories to abort. I did. I made a call, a reckless call, a calculated one. Silence stretched between them. Outside the office window, she could hear the faint roar of another jet taking off, the sound vibrating through the walls. Finally he leaned back, steepling his fingers. You think yesterday proved you can fly with this squadron. I don't think it, I know it. He studied her another moment, then reached into a desk drawer and pulled out a sealed folder. He slid it across the desk toward her. That's the roster for next month's Rapid Response Unit. Normally we select pilots from within the squadron. Yesterday disrupted that process. She opened the folder. Her name was there, fourth from the top, not a trial slot, not a temporary fill-in, a permanent posting. You're not on that list because you impressed me, he said, his tone still guarded. You're on it because you proved you won't break when things go sideways. That's the only quality that matters when the clock is ticking and the mission's ugly. She closed the folder. I'll take it. You'd better. Because the first time you pull another stunt like that without clearing it through me, you'll be off this base before the engines cool. His words were a warning, but there was no mistaking the slight shift in his tone, an acknowledgement that she'd earned a place here, even if he wouldn't say it outright. She stood, tucking the folder under her arm. Anything else, Captain? He looked back down at the radar trace, his lips pressing into a thin line. Yeah, don't get comfortable. The Raven run was just a game, the next one won't be. She gave a short nod and left without another word. Out in the hallway, the air felt lighter, not because she'd been welcomed, she hadn't, but because she'd forced the door open, and once a door was open, she knew how to keep it that way. The rapid response roster wasn't supposed to activate for another month. That's what they told her when she walked out of the captain's office, folder in hand. That's what she believed, until the alarm klaxon split the quiet afternoon 2 days later. She was in the hangar, running through a routine maintenance check with one of the ground crew, when the sharp rising wail of the base alert cut through the air. Heads snapped up, tools clattered to the floor, the intercom barked over the noise. Rapid response alpha, scramble, repeat, rapid response alpha, scramble, coordinates, incoming. Her stomach tightened. There was no warm-up, no gentle transition from the Raven run to the real thing. They were just on. The ground crew chief, a burly man with weather-beaten skin, gave her a hard look. That means you now. She was already moving. The hangar transformed into a hive of motion. Techs sprinted to prep aircraft, fueling hoses hissing, ladders clanging as they were pulled away from cockpits. The smell of jet fuel and ozone thickened, mixing with the metallic tang of adrenaline in her mouth. She reached her F-16, still the same bird from the Raven run, and swung into the cockpit. Her fingers moved through pre-flight like muscle memory, flipping switches, scanning readouts, locking her harness. This time there was no ceremonial calm. Every second mattered. The hydraulics were fixed. She could feel it in the crisp, immediate response of the controls, but the storm of 2 days ago had left its mark on the frame. Maintenance logs said she was cleared for combat speeds. She hoped the logs were right. The captain's voice came over the comms, clipped and precise. Alpha Flight, we have a priority intercept. Civilian cargo planes deviated from its flight plan and is heading into restricted airspace over the coastline. No response to hails. Possible hijack scenario. Rules of engagement: intercept, identify, and stand by for further orders. Her pulse spiked, not with fear, but with that sharp electric focus that came when training ended and reality began. The canopy lowered with a hiss. Rain wasn't falling, but the coastal winds had picked up, tossing grit and salt into the air. She could almost taste the ocean already. Falcon 6, your lead on Vector 270, the captain continued. She froze for half a second. Lead, not backup, not wingman, lead. Yes, sir. The afterburner lit, the F-16 surging forward down the runway. The acceleration was immediate, violent, pressing her into the seat as the tarmac blurred beneath her. Gear up, climb hard, level at 5,000 feet in less than a minute. The ocean flashed into view ahead, sunlight dancing on its surface. Her HUD flickered with the target marker, 20 miles out, moving slow compared to her. Falcon 5's voice came over the channel, smooth and calm now. On your wing 6. She stole a glance to her left, catching the gleam of his jet keeping pace. The rivalry from the Raven run was gone, replaced by something sharper. The cargo plane appeared on the horizon, a lumbering silhouette against the glitter of the sea. No evasive maneuvers, no distress signals, just a steady wrong course into the restricted zone. Her comms clicked as the captain came back on. Alpha Flight, confirm visual and be ready for escalation. Command wants eyes before they make the next call. She eased the throttle, holding her position just off the cargo plane's wingtip. Her gaze swept the windows, no movement, no sign of a pilot. The interior was too dark to see clearly. Something about it felt off, too still, too deliberate. She keyed her mic. Command, Falcon 6. Visual confirmed. Advise, do we attempt hail? Static answered for a long second. Then the captain's voice, low and sharp. Negative. Stand by, we may have a bigger problem. Her grip on the stick tightened. The Raven run had been about speed. For a tense 30 seconds, the only sounds in her headset were the faint hiss of static and the steady hum of her own engine. The cargo plane lumbered along, oblivious or defiant, cutting straight toward the invisible line in the sky that marked restricted airspace. Then the silence broke. Falcon 6 command. Satellite imagery confirms unusual heat signatures on board that aircraft. You are now weapons hot. Her heart gave one hard thump. Weapons hot meant the situation had shifted from observe to prepare to eliminate. Falcon 5's voice came in immediately, calm but edged. 6, you want point, or you want me to flank? Flank, she said without hesitation. If it runs, I'll push it into you. The captain cut in, his tone colder now. Remember your ROE, disable, don't destroy. There may still be civilians on board, she acknowledged even as her mind ran through the possibilities. Heat signatures could mean explosives, could mean a fire in the cargo hold, could mean, worse. She adjusted her position, dropping slightly below and ahead of the cargo plane's nose, giving them a clear view of her F-16's profile. Sometimes the sudden presence of a fighter was enough to scare a rogue pilot into compliance. Not this time. Instead, the plane dipped its nose slightly and increased speed. Not much, but enough to send a clear message. They weren't stopping. Falcon 6, Falcon 5, her wingman's voice snapped. I've got movement in the cockpit. Looks like 2, no 3 silhouettes. Her jaw tightened. Multiple operators, not a lone pilot. That meant coordination. That meant intent. She switched to the hailing frequency, her voice flat and professional. Unidentified cargo aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. Turn immediately to heading 180, or you will be engaged. No answer. The coastline was a jagged shadow beneath them now, the restricted zone less than 2 minutes ahead. She could almost feel the tension building in the command room miles away, every second bringing them closer to the point of no return. Falcon 6, the captain's voice cut in, prepare for aggressive intercept. You are cleared for a show of force. That was the polite term for make them believe they're about to die if they don't listen. She rolled her jet in a sharp, deliberate maneuver, slicing directly across the cargo plane's nose at close range, her afterburner flaring bright in their forward view. It was a visual slap in the face, a message no pilot could ignore. The response came instantly, and violently. The cargo plane's left wing dropped, banking hard toward the coastline. In the same motion, the side cargo door slid open, and something long and dark jutted out. Falcon 5's voice rose. 6 missile tube, they've got ordnance. Her HUD lit up with a threat warning, the electronic scream of incoming lock filling her headset. She yanked the stick into a defensive roll just as a streak of smoke erupted from the cargo door. The missile roared past where she'd been a heartbeat earlier, spiraling into open sky before detonating harmlessly in the distance. Command Falcon 6, hostile confirmed, she barked into the comms. The captain didn't hesitate this time. Alpha Flight, you are cleared to engage. Stop them before they cross the line. The game was over. This was now a fight. Her thumb slid to the weapon selector, flipping to guns. Falcon 5 tightened his arc, boxing the rogue aircraft in from the other side. She could feel it in her bones. The Raven run had been nothing but a rehearsal. This was the real test. The airspace ahead was tightening like a noose. The rogue cargo plane was seconds from breaching restricted territory, and if it crossed that invisible line, every second of hesitation would cost lives. Kala adjusted her angle, feeling the familiar pull of Gore forces, as she slid into the upper quadrant of what pilots called the kill box, a converging triangle of sky that gave her the cleanest shot without crossing Falcon 5's firing lane. Her HUD locked onto the target, the square reticle tracking every jitter of the cargo plane's movements. The threat warning still blinked, a reminder that another missile could launch at any second. She could almost see the hands inside, fumbling to reload. Falcon 6, you have point. The captain's voice came through, low and clipped. End this, no hesitation. She thumbed the trigger, sending a burst of 20 rounds stitching across the left wing route. The effect was immediate. The rogue aircraft shuddered, its left engine coughing black smoke before spitting flames. The sudden loss of thrust forced it into a shallow bank toward the open sea, bleeding speed fast. Good hit 6, Falcon 5 called. He dropped lower, cutting off any attempt for the plane to dive toward the coast. The cargo door was still open, wind tearing at whatever was inside. For a fraction of a second, she caught sight of movement, figures struggling to pull something back in, maybe to hide it, maybe to save it. Then the second engine coughed, not from a hit, but from the strain of carrying the crippled frame. They were going down. The only question was where. 6-5, push them out to deep water, the captain ordered. Kala cut across the nose again, her afterburner flaring bright enough to fill their cockpit with light. The rogue pilot took the bait, hauling the crippled craft further out over the ocean. Every second, their altitude dropped, the sea below shifting from a flat shimmer to a rolling, foaming detail. Eject, eject. Falcon 5's voice barked. Two figures bailed from the side door, their parachutes whipping open instantly in the coastal wind. She marked their coordinates automatically, sending them to command. Whether they'd be rescued or arrested wasn't her job. The cargo plane hit the ocean nose first seconds later, disappearing into a violent geyser of spray and debris. The impact boomed through her chest even from altitude, a deep hollow sound that seemed to vibrate the air. Silence followed. She banked in a wide arc, scanning the crash site. Flames licked briefly on the water before being swallowed by the sea. Pieces of debris bobbed, glinting in the sunlight. Command, Falcon 6, target neutralized. Survivors in the water, coordinates sent. The captain's voice came back after a pause. Copy 6, return to base. Falcon 5 slid into formation beside her as they turned inland, the coastline stretching back into view. Neither spoke for a long moment. Then over the private channel, his voice came through, low but clear. You just proved yesterday wasn't a fluke. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The Raven run had been a contest. This had been survival, and she'd led the charge. As the base came into sight, she knew without doubt, whatever grudges or doubts had lingered in the squadron were gone. She wasn't just part of the unit now. She was the pilot they'd call when there was no margin for error. And the captain knew it too. The base looked different as she came in for landing, not physically, but in the way people would see her now. The runway shimmered in the midday heat, and the control tower's windows caught the sun in sharp flashes. For once there was no storm to fight through, no mechanical fault to nurse, just a clean approach, wheels kissing the tarmac like a formality. She taxied in alongside Falcon 5, both jets rolling to a stop on the hot concrete. Ground crew swarmed them, but the energy was different this time, quick, efficient, and heavy with unspoken respect. No gawking, no disbelief, just recognition. She popped her canopy, pulling off her helmet and letting the warm air rush in. Sweat cooled instantly on her skin. As she climbed down, she saw the captain waiting near the hangar doors, arms folded, his expression as unreadable as ever. Falcon 5 reached him first, exchanging a quiet word before peeling off toward the debrief room. That left her walking into the captain's shadow alone. He didn't speak right away. His gaze tracked her as she crossed the space between them, boots echoing against the concrete. Finally he said, "You did exactly what I told you to do. Intercept and neutralize the target," she replied evenly. "No," he said, shaking his head slightly. "Prove me wrong." That caught her off guard. "I put you on that roster to see if you could hang with the best," he continued. "Yesterday was a race, today was war, and you didn't just hang, you led." She stood silent, letting him finish. "I don't hand out compliments," he said. "You've probably figured that out by now. But you earned something more valuable than words. You earned trust." She gave a short nod. "Then I'll keep earning it." A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good, because missions like today's, they're only going to get harder. And when I say any pilot from here on out," he paused, meeting her eyes, "everyone's going to know exactly who I mean." For a moment the sounds of the base seemed far away. The hum of engines, the clank of tools, the murmur of voices. All that existed was the unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, the kind that wasn't written in any report. She turned toward the hangar, the sun at her back, her helmet under her arm. Somewhere inside, debriefs and paperwork waited, but none of that mattered. The Raven run, the storm, the intercept, all of it had led here, to this quiet, undeniable truth. She wasn't just any pilot. She was the one who landed from. 2 days after the intercept, she was summoned to a briefing room she'd never been in before. The lights were dim, the walls lined with screens showing live satellite feeds of places she couldn't name. The captain was there, but so were two people she didn't recognize.
one in civilian clothes, the other in an unmarked flight suit, with no squadron pass. "Sit," the captain said. The civilian spoke first, his voice smooth but without warmth. "You've been flagged for a priority assignment outside the chain of standard operations. This is off book, which means if anything goes wrong, your name isn't in the She leaned back slightly. "And if it goes right, then it never happened." The screen shifted to an image of a remote airstrip carved into a desert plateau. Two aircraft sat on the runway, sleek, narrow shapes painted in matte black. "Not military standard. Those," the man in the unmarked suit said, "are testbed interceptors. Faster than your F-16, stealth profile designed for low-altitude penetration. One of them was stolen last night, by unknown actors. Satellite pinged its transponder once before it went dark. We believe it's being held here." The map zoomed in on a canyon rim flanked by ridges, with the airstrip sitting like a knife blade in the center. "Your job," the captain said, "is to get in, recover the aircraft, and bring it back without alerting anyone on the ground. You'll be paired with one other pilot, and you'll leave at midnight." Her mind raced. This wasn't a scramble mission. This was infiltration in the sky, an operation that would require stealth, precision, and the kind of nerves that didn't shake even at zero altitude. She nodded slowly. "Who's the other pilot?" The captain smiled faintly. "Falcon 5. The desert at night was a black ocean. Stars hung sharp above, the moon a thin silver hook. Her jet skimmed the surface of the landscape at barely 100 feet, the ridges on either side, sliding past in shadowed blurs. The stealth profile worked exactly as briefed. No radar ping, no heat trail detectable from the satellites overhead. But the trade-off was speed. Low-altitude penetration meant they couldn't go supersonic without risking detection. Falcon 5's voice was calm over the encrypted channel. 2 minutes to canyon entry. Watch the crosswinds, they'll try to shove you into the rock." She adjusted her stick slightly, feeling the subtle push of air curling around the cliffs ahead. Even in darkness, the canyon walls seemed to loom higher with each passing second. When they entered the cut, the wind became a living thing, slapping at the wings, trying to shove them sideways. Flying here wasn't about brute force, it was about riding the currents, letting the aircraft dance with the chaos without fighting it too hard. The stolen jet's beacon pinged once, faint but clear, from somewhere ahead. "Got it," she said. As they curved deeper into the canyon, the lights of the airstrip came into view, a thin line of illumination between the shadows. Two figures moved on the tarmac, too far away to identify. Falcon 5's voice dropped. "We cap." They split at the canyon's last bend. Falcon 5, climbing just enough to provide overwatch while she cut her lights, and dropped to the deck. The stolen jet sat at the far end of the strip, its matte black frame nearly invisible against the dark. She eased her F-16 down onto the tarmac with barely a whisper of contact, taxiing into the shadows near a storage line. The stolen aircraft was untouched. No signs of sabotage, no obvious trail. She climbed out, helmet still on, and sprinted across the cold concrete. The cockpit was sealed but unlocked. Amateurs. Sliding inside, she powered up the system. The HUD blinked to life with the quiet hum, its interface sleeker and cleaner than the engine start sequence was almost silent, the deep whine muffled by the stealth bell. "Falcon 6, you've got company." Falcon 5. Two vehicles inbound from the north side. She pushed the throttle gently forward. The jet rolling down the strip. Lights flared. The stolen jet surged down the road. The headlights behind her grew smaller, then vanished as the stealth craft leapt into 2. The headlights behind her grew smaller, then Falcon 5's laughter crackled over. "Told you, your lead now." The stolen jet handled like nothing she'd flown before. Sleek, responsive, almost too smooth, like it was reading her. But the moment she cleared the canyon melted. A new warning. Multiple fast movers inbound. Falcon 6, you've got tails. Falcon 5 said, his voice tight. 3 bogeys, no transponder. The first missile lock alert. Seconds later, the shrill tone filling her head. She yanked the stick into a heartbreak. Pushing her into the seat. The problem wasn't evading 1 missile. It was surviving 3 interceptors without blowing the stealth cover. 6. Bring them toward Falcon 5. Falcon 5. The stolen aircraft had speed to spare, but no afterburner. The stealth profile demanded low heat signature, and that meant she couldn't outrun them the conventional way. Falcon 5-16 dropped from altitude, guns hot, cutting across the boogie's nose with the flash of tracer. The enemy formation split. Instantly, 2 peeled, flew in, while 1 stuck to her tail. She dove low over the depths of skimming the ridgeline so close she could see individual rocks. Flash paths beneath her. The stolen jet sensors painted the pursuit in it. Department for she banked her into a altitude. She banked her into a winding canyon, pulling jets that would make most pilots black out. The enemy followed for the first 2 turns, but the third was the starfighter tried to follow and clipped its wingtip spiral. The strike fighter tried to fall and clipped its wingtip, spiraling in a plume of fire. 6. You clip. Falcon 5's voice came back, coming to you. They regrouped over the open deck. The sure stick their 2 remaining bogeys gun sight, either retreating or dead. The base was on the first you could feel the This wasn't just a recovery mission. The base lights glow. The horizon, a thin band of gold again, stood dark. She brought the stolen jet and a parallel approach with Falcon 5. First she took the head. First she took as she taxied toward secure hangar. First she took She powered down and climbed out. Liz hitting the tarmac with a dull thud. Won't be bothering me. You've made your point twice now. 6, he said finally. First in a A slow smile broke across his face, the first she'd seen from him. Exactly. Somewhere deep inside the base, orders were already being rewritten, rosters adjusted. As she walked away into the night, helmet under her, she knew the truth. The captain just confirmed what saying. She wasn't just any pilot, she was the pilot. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.